Welcome to the Year of Yes podcast. I'm your host, Sam, and this week, my special guest is Mr. Scott Gurian. He is the host and producer of the Far From Home podcast, which is one of my favorite podcasts ever. And I shot my shot. I was like, I'm going to ask him. I'm going to just reach out and see if he wants to be on my podcast because it's like a long shot, but let's do it. And then he said yes.
Why not?
Scott, your first yes was, for me anyway, was saying yes to this podcast.
Oh, this is nothing. I've said yes to all kinds of crazy things, so I'm glad to be on. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So, okay, I definitely have questions for you about some yeses that I know you've said in your life, but I want to know what do you think is an influential yes from your life?
Probably, I mean, the biggest yes I probably ever said was a few years ago when a friend a British friend who, or actually, she's British originally, but now lives in Australia, who my brother and I met when we were traveling in Cuba. She invited my brother and me to join her on this crazy 11,000-mile road trip for charity, driving from the UK to Mongolia in a little tiny car that was totally unsuitable for the journey.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a really crazy experience. Took us about 7 weeks, had all kinds of car trouble along the way. I documented the whole story in the first season of my podcast, as you know. And lots of crazy stories driving, through, I think, 18 or 19 countries, through Iran as an American tourist, going, through Turkey 6 days after an attempted coup. This is back in 2016. And, driving along the Pamir Highway in Tajikistan, right across the river from Afghanistan, like just crazy stories, and, car
Mm-hmm.
breakdowns, overheating in the middle of the desert, and getting stranded in the middle of nowhere in Mongolia and having to get rescued, and like just crazy stories. So
Mm.
that was a pretty big yes. I think I didn't realize how big of a yes it was at the time when I said it, but it left us all with lots of crazy, interesting stories to
And a
tell.
really good podcast, like a
Yeah, thank you.
series.
Yes, yeah. I documented the whole thing. That's because I'm an audio guy, and I figured this is a crazy trip, and it's a perfect thing to document. So I'm really glad I did it in retrospect.
Totally.
And I've
I
always
am
loved
too.
traveling. Yeah, thank you. I don't know. Just personally, I feel like all the opportunities where I've ventured outside of my comfort zone, even just a little bit, and said yes to something that I never really imagined doing, like those have been the most interesting experiences. And I feel like I've grown as a person, and I've just looked back and I'm like really glad I did all those things.
Mm-hmm. So the yes to the rally in the first place, your
Mhm.
friend just came up with the idea and asked.
Yeah, so my brother and we used to like go on a big trip every year over Christmas and New Year's because we didn't have, a lot of close family. We figured we'd go do something interesting over the holidays. So we were in Cuba this one year, and we had kind of this that we were in a tour group, which we don't usually do tours, but we did for whatever reason in Cuba. And our tour guide wasn't very good, and he kind of got drunk and abandoned our tour group one evening. And so all of us in the tour group kind of bonded. And this woman, Rosie, was in the group, the one from Australia, was there with her husband, Alan. And so we became good friends with her, and with the other people. And we kept in touch after the event. And she said, she contacted us, I don't know, a number of months later, and said, "Hey, I'm planning on doing this big crazy road trip with my best friend Jane, raising money for charity. And would you and your brother like to join us?" And I had known before, she had mentioned she was going to do this trip. And for whatever reason, just the thought never occurred to me, like, oh, you could do this too. And then,
Right.
but the moment she mentioned it, she's like, "Oh, would you and your brother like to join me?" I was immediately like, oh my gosh, that sounds incredible. I would love to do that. And I'd
So it
love
was
to
an immediate
document it.
yes.
Pretty much. I mean, there was, I had to, yes. And then like, hesitated after I said the yes, I think a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
just thinking about what it would entail. And I mean, just knowing all the work that would go into a trip like that, it took months and months of planning,
Right.
figuring out all the route you're going to take and all the gear you need, and raising money and getting visas and vaccinations and learning how to do basic car repairs and first aid and like everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then also just like knowing that we would be driving across Iran as American tourists. And I mean, I'd heard great things about Iran, like the people are so friendly, but you know, it is still Iran. We're still Americans. And, you know, like my father was like, well, they're going to be chanting death to America. And is it safe there? And it, you know, and then at the last minute, the whole thing with Turkey came up, that there was an attempted coup just 6 days before we were supposed to arrive at the border to cross it. So there was the initial yes. And then I feel like
Mm-hmm.
there was a little bit of hesitation afterwards. And I wasn't so worried about Iran. Turkey, we were kind of nervous about, but we reached out to people, kind of friends of friends on the ground there, and asked them, well, hey, what do you think? Like, what are you seeing around you? Do you think it's safe for us to go? Because that's always your best, you know, source, more than reading news or trying to gather information from afar. If you actually talk to people on the ground, like if the locals say it's not safe, don't go here, I'm going to trust them, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But otherwise it can be hard to judge. And then I was concerned about we ended up going across Turkey, and we just to be safe, we skipped Istanbul and Ankara and kind of zoomed past, went to Cappadocia, which is amazing. There's like these cave homes that people have lived in for millennia. That was really cool. I'd love to go back to Turkey at some point and explore
Yeah.
some more. I still haven't been to Istanbul, but anyway, um, so yeah, I was a little nervous about that. And then in the Pamir Highway in Tajikistan, that was like literally right across the river from Afghanistan, like within shouting distance of people on the other side. And I was kind of nervous about that also personally, and it turned out to be totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there were these moments of hesitation even after the initial yes, where I was second
Right.
guessing
I'm
myself.
sure you had to, at certain points, continue saying yes, like
Mhm.
renewing your yeses as you went.
Yeah, I mean,
It's not like
mhm.
other people didn't bail out before the end.
Yeah. Oh no, a lot of people, especially with all the car trouble we had many chances
Mm-hmm.
where we could have just thrown in the towel. And you know, and we were a team. It was my brother and me, and then our friends Rosie and Jane. We were in another car. We were caravanning together, and so we all needed to make sure we were comfortable with things. We, you know, if someone was really opposed to something, you know, we would have listened to them. Don't want to force someone to do something they really don't want to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were, and you know, the situation, the political situation, especially with Turkey, things were constantly changing hour by hour, and trying to reassess, well, what are our options? Can we go a different route? Will our visa allow for that? How much time do we have in our schedule to, you know, we got to make it to the end by a certain point because people already booked their flights home. And
Mm-hmm.
so there were like so many different factors and variables we were trying to weigh. So yeah, it was constantly kind of looking at our options and looking at compromises and figuring out, okay, how do we approach this going forward?
Do you feel like going on this trip um, has changed your life with regards to yes? Has it made it, I don't know, easier to say yes?
Uh, Perhaps. Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah, there's a feeling like if you did this, I could do anything.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I think just this idea of just like, you know, that this crazy idea that's just at one point just in your mind, you're like, okay, I could go on this crazy adventure. And then a number of months later, like you're actually there, you're in this other country in the other side of the world, and you're like, wow, like this was just
Mm-hmm.
like a seed of an idea in my mind a number of months ago, and I took the initiative. I decided to, you know, go here. And I mean, the same thing with, because I'm, you know, aside from making my own podcast, I'm a radio producer and podcast producer for other shows, and I pitch stories sometimes. And you know, I was like doing a story for NPR, and I went to Antigua and Barbuda, and you know, just I remember saying to my colleague who I was co-reporting this story with, like we were standing on the beach in Barbuda in the middle of December, and it was like wonderful weather, and it's like crazy, like I was thinking like, oh wow, like just like 3 months ago, 4 months ago, whatever it was, like I just came up with this idea, and I pitched it, and they accepted it, and like now here I am, like this is crazy, like I should do this more often,
Yeah.
like it's so cool, like I just, yeah, I should, you know, there's nothing holding me back, like just to take the initiative and say yes and like do these things, like take the leap.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things I've been wanting to do which I still haven't gotten around to doing for whatever reason. Like I've really been wanting to spend more time traveling and more time like actually living abroad, you know, not just like a trip here, a trip there. So I haven't done that yet, because I mean there's some things tying me down. I like own a house and I have housemates,
Mm.
and like things back home. I've just got a lot of junk I got to get rid of to downsize
Hmm.
to, like, if I ever want to sell my house and just pick up and move, so I'm like little by little slowly trying to go down that path.
The other thing that stood out to me from your story about the rally is that it
Hmm.
started with an invitation.
Yeah.
And it started with someone else saying yes and then inviting you to
Hmm.
say yes or no. And that makes me think about, like, maybe we as a culture, we as friends, we as family members, we as colleagues need to invite people to do more things,
Yeah.
crazy things or not. But
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would have had the idea to do this if it were just up to me. Like,
right.
it seems it's a crazy enough idea that, like, I feel like just because I was going with some other people, like, it seemed like, okay, maybe it'll be safer. And these are two like middle-aged women. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, I mean, most of the people going, it's called the Mongol Rally event. Most of them are like young kids, taking a gap year before college or something. And they were, some of the oldest people who signed up for this. And I figured, okay, if they could do it, like, my brother and I can totally do
Right.
this. And so there's that level of safety, and just having friends you'd be caravanning together with them. And yeah, for whatever reason, like I said, just the idea, even though I knew they were doing it, it wasn't until I got that invitation and
Hmm.
Rosie said, would you and your brother like to join me, that I realized, oh yeah, I could do this. Like, I don't know why I didn't think of it before, but yeah,
Yeah.
invitations are great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's all we need to get out of our comfort zone or our ruts.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I love. I'm probably more willing to do something if someone gives me an invitation or plants the seed in my mind than just do it on my own
Right. It's
sometimes.
way harder to change your own inertia. I brought up
Right.
inertia in last week's episode because I think it's really true in life.
Hmm.
Sometimes we need help changing our inertia.
Right. You get stuck in a rut, or you just have certain kind of routines, or you're doing things a certain way, but you don't even think like, oh, I could do this some other way. Like, it took me a long time to even really start traveling. Like, people think, they listen to my show and they think I've always been super adventurous, and that's not the case.
Yeah.
Like, I remember, like, back in high school, like, my mom had to twist my arm to, like, say, "Oh, you should go on the Mexican, the Spanish exchange." Like, I was just not interested in traveling. Or I remember, I grew up in New Jersey, and I remember looking at colleges and looking at some schools like in New Orleans, and I thought, well, this is too far away from home. And I, I, I don't know. I was just never that I never had that sense of adventure in me for
Hmm.
whatever reason. I never like studied abroad in college. I mean, my college like owns a castle in the Netherlands, and I could have like gone there for a semester. And
Wow.
I don't know why the thought just never really occurred to me. So I feel like I missed out on a lot of stuff. But then I finally kind of came around, I think, during my later years in college. Um, I think what really sparked it was I was, starting to do some kind of freelance radio reporting, and had some friends who were like filmmakers who were making a documentary about the Zapatista Indians, this like rebel indigenous tribe in Mexico. If people remember old like Rage Against the Machine videos, they're like the people wearing like the balaclavas.
Okay.
And they were doing this like bus tour across Mexico for indigenous dignity, like
Wow.
marching on the Zocalo, the central, square in Mexico City, to, with all these other indigenous groups around all of Mexico to, press for indigenous rights. And so it just so happened that like the second week of their caravan lined up with like my spring break from college. I
Okay.
forget whether it was my junior or senior year. So I flew down there. Like my filmmaker friends were already there. They had started already. So I joined them like this second week of their trip, and just going around like as a 20-year-old kid or whatever I was, like totally I'd never really done like a big international trip like that on my own. Didn't know what I was doing, was in so over my head. I rented, this is before like the internet, never, or before like people had, smartphones and everything. So I like
Mhm.
rented a cell phone from the airport in Mexico City, ended up getting like a $2,000 cell phone bill at the end of the
Oh
week when I brought it back,
no.
making all these international calls. I was like reporting on, doing like these daily like live, stories that aired like nationally across the US from like the middle of nowhere in Mexico. And just this crazy experience where it was just so cool. It was the coolest thing I ever did. And not even speaking much Spanish. And that just really, I think, planted the seed in me. Like, I want to be like a foreign correspondent. I want to do more traveling. I want to do more stuff like this. Because
Yeah.
when I think back to all like the reporting I've done over the years, like the coolest experiences I've ever had have been when I've been abroad, like in another country, exploring, and understanding another culture.
Yeah.
So I really want to do more of that, and that I think that really planted the seed in my mind. And then I spent like a summer abroad working at like a shortwave radio station in Costa Rica, and like ever since then I've wanted to do more international stuff.
A side note, um,
Mhm.
when you were in Lima,
Mhm.
when you were in Peru,
Yes,
I think you reached out to my friend
I did.
Diego, but I
Yes.
don't know exactly what came of that.
So I was in Lima for about a month. That was another one of these kind of long stays that I feel like I need to spend a lot of time in a place to really find interesting stories.
Yeah,
And
totally.
the other interesting stories where I met this medicine man guy who came from
I
the
listened to
jungle.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I went on this quest with him to find this star-shaped stone that he had seen in his hallucinogenic vision that supposedly had magical healing powers. And then the follow-up to that was I joined him on this ayahuasca healing ceremony that he led. Um,
That was
so
another yes. Did you have any
yeah, that was a
trepidation about
very
that
big.
yes?
Oh, did I ever? Oh my gosh, yes, definitely. Yeah, I don't do any drugs or anything. I mean, I've never even smoked pot. I have no interest in it. I mean, I've been around people do whatever, but um I, I don't know. So this was a big thing because it's like this hallucinogenic potion that is brewed up with plants from the jungle. It's not, I wouldn't consider it a drug. It's more because people don't do it to like get their kicks. Like it's a medicinal kind of a thing. And people have these like hallucinations, and it supposedly can cure all sorts of things. And for some people, it can apparently be like life changing. And so I went to document this ceremony that this guy Lucho, we would call him a shaman. He doesn't like that word. He calls himself a curandero, like a curer. And so I followed him, with a ceremony he was leading, and he offered me. He said, "Would you like to have a little bit, to like experience what it's like for these people?" And I had to, think about that. At first I was like, no. But then I thought, in the interest of journalism, like, I'm documenting, what these people are going through.
Yeah.
And, I compromised and I said, well, just give me a little bit so I can try to, experience what it's like for them without the full dose. And as it turned out, it ended up not being a big enough dose for me. And I had almost no, reaction to it whatsoever, which I was thinking that my tolerance would be, zilch, having never
Right.
had anything like this before. And supposedly for a variety of reasons, I did a recent podcast episode where I revisited that, looking at kind of how I was approaching it wrong potentially. But yeah, so that was like a super big yes, at least for me, having never done anything like that before. But it gives you confidence. Like now that I've done that, I mean, I'm not going to go take hard drugs or anything, but each one of these little things where you say yes to, and where you're like venturing a little bit out of your comfort zone, it makes it a little bit easier to do the next thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not ready to like go jump out of an airplane tomorrow, but maybe I'll get there at some point. My brother's done it. He says it's really cool. But I feel like I'm building myself up, little by little, and I always feel great after I've done something I've never imagined myself doing. Like it gives you confidence, and
Right.
you're like, wow, I did that. I can do anything.
So I'm going back to Peru this summer,
Mhm. Okay.
and I'm going to have the opportunity to do a wachuma ceremony, which is
Okay.
like a cousin of ayahuasca.
Okay.
And I'm really on the fence about
Okay.
whether or not I'm going to say yes to it. It's like, it's my year of
Okay.
yes. So
Hmm.
I'm supposed to be saying yes to things that scare me
Hmm.
and new
Hmm.
experiences.
Yeah.
But I also don't do drugs.
Yeah.
And the idea of like experiencing something that makes me dizzy and something that might make me throw up and
Mm.
something that makes me hallucinate or like lose
Right.
control to
Yeah.
the point that those drugs can,
Right.
um, it just terrifies me.
Yeah, I think I know where you're coming from, because I think that was part of my hesitation, that I very much always, I don't know, I should see a shrink or something, but I feel like I always need to, my psychology part of me always needs to feel like I'm in control to some degree. And like not knowing what, even the first time I like did hypnosis or like not knowing what it would be, and it ended up being like nothing. But this thought that you might like not have control of your body or
Yeah.
not, I mean, that's why I never, I drink alcohol, but I don't drink to excess where I've never like blacked out or anything like that. Like I don't want to I don't want to put myself in those experiences.
Yeah. And it doesn't
So
feel good to
yeah.
be sick. Like
No.
I don't like the
Yeah.
feeling of being nauseous or throwing up.
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, they would say that there's you're like purging whatever bad stuff out of your
Right.
body, and that there's some good that comes out of it in
I
the
guess I'm
end.
also skeptical that it's actually connecting to anything spiritual or
Right. And that's very individual. Like you can't count on that happening. Like it's different for
right.
every person. And
Do you think that ayahuasca or wachuma is something that everyone should say yes to once in their life?
oh, I don't know. I wouldn't say that. No. I mean, I feel like it's a very personal thing. I think in general, I'd encourage people to kind of venture out of their comfort zone and try new things. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't say like this particular experience everyone needs to try in their life. Like it's, I mean, maybe some simpler things, but like something as big as that, or like skydiving or something like,
Right.
I feel like it's maybe for someone that's just going too far. But
Yeah.
maybe it's going to a Thai restaurant for the first time or something, maybe for someone that's a really big thing, like it was for you at that time.
Yeah.
And even if it's a small thing, like if it's a big thing for you, like I feel like you should try that. Just start small. And you don't need to do anything, some big grand crazy thing. Like you could start small, whatever it is. It's still
Totally.
a step in the right direction.
I would go skydiving before I did wachuma
Yeah. Okay.
on my level of comfort.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Skydiving would still be scary, but
Yeah.
I feel like it would be more fun.
Yeah. Are there like big plans of this year of yes, like things that you're like really planning or looking forward to? Like this is a really big yes that will the Peru thing, but are there others that come to mind?
There's nothing, there's not a big yes planned.
Or
It's
something you're
more,
considering? Yeah.
well, the skydiving is on the list
Okay.
of
Hmm.
considerations.
Yeah.
It's more, let's see what comes up
Okay.
instead of let's plan the yes.
Okay. And hoping people give you invitations.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It's very,
Okay.
yeah, it's very invitation based and it's very situational based.
What is, we're not very far into the year, but what is the yes you've said that you've been proudest of so far? Or what was the biggest one for you?
I think the biggest one has been the yes to Peru
Okay.
because I never thought I would go back to Peru.
Hmm.
I didn't have a very good experience when I was there, other than the food. The food was actually quite good, but I didn't love it, and I never thought I would go back. Other than that, I think the biggest yes has been to my business and really working on my business and trying to grow it and trying to have this year be the year that I have some contractors, some subcontractors who are pretty regular. And then, of course, having the work to regularly have subcontractors.
Hmm.
That's a big goal for the year.
Hmm. Hmm. Cool.
Because it's been really easy to coast just on what I can make for myself and what I can live on for myself. But I have bigger dreams than that.
Hmm.
And I think I've been scared to say yes to those dreams, like
Hmm.
to really try for it. So I'm saying yes this year.
Okay. Cool.
And hopefully I don't fail.
Hmm.
But even if I fail, I said yes.
Well, this is great because a lot of people come up with resolutions that, I'm going to do this in the new year, but I mean, we're not that far in. We're at, as we're recording, it's the end of February, but so far so good. Like you're keeping at it so far.
Yep.
And so I wish you the best of luck. I hope this continues, and it
Thank you.
seems like it could be really great and really, helpful to kind of have this framework to
Yeah.
do a lot of stuff you've been wanting to do anyway. But, uh, you decided to like say this, I'm going to do this whole year, and not just that, but I'm going to start this podcast to kind of force
Mm-hmm.
yourself to be accountable.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
so that's a good way of doing it. I should I don't know, I feel like I should figure out how to, I don't know, build in more accountability to, like, I need to like exercise more, or like things like I don't know, figure out ways like that to like make sure I continue doing
Yeah.
the things.
Well, you can join the Yes community if you want. There's a place on the website. You can get a monthly email that will remind you about your yeses.
Okay, I will look into that. Yeah.
In
Okay.
fact, any one of you out there who's listening can go to yearofyespodcast.com and join the community. It's free and no strings attached.
Very cool. We'll look into that.
And at the end of the year, you'll be invited to the Christmas party or New Year's party or something for everyone in the Yes community.
Very cool. Well, that's kudos for encouraging all these people to maybe venture a little bit outside of their comfort zone, and like keep at it. Like, that's really exciting. And
Yeah, I
maybe
think,
several of you can get together and like all go skydiving together, or do something,
hey, we're talking
jointly.
about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Very
We're
cool.
talking about it.
Very cool.
So is there any other yes encouragement that you want to leave people with?
Just like I said, like, start, you could go at your own pace, and you can start small. But I think the key is to like go in that direction. Like, just try to constantly try something new. Like, try, maybe it's a new food, maybe it's a new routine, maybe it's, taking a yoga class or a karate class, or something like I never imagined that, like I want to learn to do like pottery, or
Mm-hmm.
like there's a lot of things that I've always been curious about. You don't need to make a big commitment, and it doesn't
Yeah.
need to be an ongoing thing, but at least try it. Go once, see what it's like. Maybe you'll find some new passion or something you're really excited in that you never would have imagined.
I totally agree with that. What is one thing you think I should definitely say yes to this year?
Oh man. Uh
You can pick anything.
it's hard for me to say because I don't know you that well, so I
Yeah,
don't know
well,
kind of
it might
what.
be it might be an even better yes.
um I mean, the skydiving would be, maybe we could go together at some point. I don't know. I feel like that's like, I've never liked heights, and I've always been kind of scared. But
Yeah.
I feel like that's the kind of thing where you'd have so much confidence after you did it. Like, wow, like I did that. Like, I can do anything.
I
Because it's
would
a,
definitely 100% plan that with you.
yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, we could continue this conversation.
We
Mhm.
got a tentative plan then.
Okay.
I
Oh
roped you
man.
into this.
Oh no, I
Although
can't
I
believe I
didn't.
just
You volunteered this.
yeah. Oh man. I'm gonna regret this. I won't regret it after the fact, but we'll see.
Okay. All right. This took a twist.
Wow.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I
This was
appreciate it.
super fun. Yeah, everyone needs to go subscribe to the Far From Home podcast. It is one of my favorite podcasts ever.
Thank you so much.
And while you're out there on the interwebs, go to yearofyespodcast.com and you can follow us on all the socials, all the podcast apps, whatever your heart desires, and join the community if you so desire. And until next week, keep saying your yeses. Bye.
Thanks so much for having me.